Did you, just briefly, when you said you had a bit of a presence in Hong Kong and then you went to places like Singapore and Malaysia and some of the other countries, surrounding countries, did you find culturally that they were similar, so it was a similar process, or did you find they were kind of a bit more different than you would have expected?
I think I've always been quite culturally aware because I was really fortunate in my sort of previous career, travelled all over the world. I was on the board of 3 Chinese companies, going back to the early 90s. I was going to Inner Mongolia, 1990, 1991, right? You ever want to lose your, forget your Slim Fast plan or any diet plan, go there for a fortnight and you'll drop half a stone. It's way better now, obviously. But I was always I would like to think quite culturally aware, maybe not culturally sensitive, but culturally aware. And I think, looking back, we were always tuned in, probably in the first instance, we believe we've got a product solution that's commercially attractive, because without that, it didn't matter how culturally aware you were. And at one extreme, in North America, primarily government funded, English speaking, but still a different selling proposition, very risk averse, right? Because no one was ever fired for buying IBM, so there was never any real desire to change what you already had because you're notionally a government employee. So we had to learn that very quickly. And then at the other extreme, you go to Hong Kong or Malaysia or some of these places, a real heady mix of decision-making, commercials, and also, for example, in Malaysia, very hierarchical. And ultimately, descendants of the royal family are pretty much in every key position. So you had to be kind of down and dirty with getting the product right and the service and support right. But we actually had to bring in, agents and I guess, introductory services to help us try and get in at the right level. And probably the final point I would make in the very early days was when we were invited to tender, we were 3 years too late. You've got to build a relationship before the tender comes out, because people buy from people. Humans are social creatures, and it's about the relationship. It's about having the confidence and the trust in your supplier partner that they're going to do the right thing. As I talked about earlier, that doing the right thing.
Yeah, definitely. And so that takes into account the moving to different markets and that. And what would be any other things that you think's worth sharing that it got you over to achieve the 400? Was it 392? No, 480.
Nearly 500.
What other things would you say made the biggest difference?
Well, again, luck played a bit of a part as well, because with the London Olympics, and Boris Johnson wanted lots of new double decks, and Boris Johnson had committed to get rid of all the articulated buses. So, I'll never ever lose sight of the fact that probably 50 to 100 million of that was glossy and lucky. But then I would equally say for our team, none of us could have predicted a global financial crisis kicking in late 2008 and all the way into early 2010. And we could have used that as an excuse. But we come up with these plans pre the crisis, pre-COVID, pre-whatever, and COVID screwed it over and blah, 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 right? Yeah. Well, get over it, right? Life is not a bowl of cherries or whatever that saying is. You get good and bad. You need to take full advantage of the good, mitigate the bad, and nobody wants you to get your violin out. I think on a one-to-one basis, when you're either working with people, mentoring people, whatever, I think when you can bring those stories to life, people get it, and they can relate to the kind of key facts or whatever in their world or their business or their competitive landscape or whatever. And I think as Scotland PLC, as a small country, there should be no excuse for us not being able to share our learnings, goods and bads. And again, I'll be honest with you, I've probably learned more through the bad stuff and the mistakes. I worked for a couple of brilliant people, and I've worked for a couple of real howlers. And I learned way more from the howlers in terms of what not to do.
What made the howlers?
The one biggest howler, in fact, the two of them were utter nutcases. So one of them was talking earlier about, my temper and controlling and whatever. One of them was just a schizophrenic off the scale, and you could never do anything right. And he was a Bulgarian national who'd moved to the States, and the way he treated people was absolutely abhorrent. It was just, and I learned, I was still a bit of a nutter, but if I hadn't worked for him, I'd probably be even more of a nutter. And the other guy was so anal in attention to detail and projects, and he'd come from a great big defence corporate what he tried to do was just apply almost like, the what do you call the guy, Ford model of, you can have any colour as long as it's black. So for him, it was, to the man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Everything was just to his toolkit. And we probably lost years and millions, if not billions, of shareholder value because this guy just would not listen and would not take the value from the team dynamic and the bigger picture.